And for more on this, I want to bring in Richard Johnson, who's a senior lecturer in U.S. politics at Queen Mary University of London, and he joins us from Oxford, England. Good to see you again. So that youth conference was supposed to be about honoring Charlie Kirk's legacy, but what we've actually seen is Ben Shapiro calling Tucker Carlson a fraud, Carlson mocking Shapiro from the same stage a few hours later, Steve Bannon calling Shapiro a cancer. I mean, what does it tell us that the biggest conservative gathering of the year has turned into an internal fight?
This is fascinating to see for the perspective of what we might call the Kremlinology of Trump world. I think you have to put it in the perspective that Donald Trump's political strength has always come from how bolted on his MAGA base is to him and to his agenda. And in his first term, whenever he ran into trouble, whether that was with Democrats or, quite frankly, with fellow Republicans, he was able to return back to his MAGA base as a source of support. And materially, that would mean, for example, that he could say to Republicans who challenged him in Congress, look, if you don't stand by me, then I'm going to support a primary challenger and my MAGA base are going to vote you out. Now, the question is his power to do that starting to fray and fragment as perhaps has been seen by the Turning Point USA conference divisions? And if that's the case, then that could make it more difficult for President Trump to make Republicans fall in line behind him, either on items of his own legislative agenda, such as they may still remain, or on questions of oversight over his administration, where I expect we'll see more and more discussion in the coming months and years.
All right, so that's concerning his support in Congress. What about his support among voters? I mean, you study voter behavior. The polls show young people, who are the focus of that conference, who voted for Trump in 2024 are already less enthusiastic about showing up in the midterm. So if you're a Republican strategist, what worries you more, the divisions that we're seeing play out at this conference, or maybe the economic numbers that aren't moving in the party's direction?
I think in terms of the midterm elections, it'll be the economic story that is the one that will be most costly for the Republicans. And we can see that in terms of, say, the generic ballot, where the Republican versus Democrat generic question for who would you vote for Congress, the Republicans are sliding further and further. And there's really now a very dramatic gap which has opened up. Now, of course, a lot can change between now and November, but really what the Republicans need to see is really demonstrable improvement in the economy at a time when a lot of economists are quite pessimistic about the situation in the United States with respect to the economy, and people are worried that the United States could be running into greater economic trouble, not seeing that improve. There's also, I think, from the perspective of the divisions, where that would have an impact on the midterm is enthusiasm, and midterms tend to be elections where there is an enthusiasm gap between the party in the White House, which tends to have less enthusiasm, and the party that's outside the White House because they want to express their frustration with the way the country's going. And I think that enthusiasm gap is really also very profound, and that's where the Turning Point story comes into this.
Fueling some of the cracks in the party is the Epstein issue. We've seen this Justice Department release the Epstein files, and within 24 hours, a photo featuring Trump disappeared from the website. Marjorie Taylor Greene already resigned from Congress in part over Epstein issues. How much do you think that this issue has the potential to fracture the party even further?
To be honest, I do think that the Epstein issue is often viewed through partisan lenses. And so I think that committed Republican partisans are focusing their attention on the Democrats, of course, Bill Clinton, who's come up in a lot of these images, and that's where their focus will be, where, of course, Democrats and committed Democratic partisans, their focus is on Trump, and also where is Trump, and this story about some of these photos that feature Trump now being removed from the list that's on the DOJ website, of course, feeds into that. Generally speaking, this isn't a good issue for the president because, of course, he is known to be associated with Epstein. He is in some pictures. There was a released missed call from Donald Trump, I think, in the files, for example. But In terms of smoking gun, I guess there's nothing that's particularly from what we've seen smoking gun evidence. And so I think that enables people on different sides of the partisan divide to read into this what they want to read into. It's not good for the president from the perspective of independence, I should say that. And he's taken a real hit among independents since he became president last January.
Certainly an interesting moment for the party. We'll see which way it goes. Richard Johnson, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.